Hello and welcome to another new episode of Engineered Unicorns at Campus Radio Karlsruhe, and this book podcast is about fantasy books, preferably with a good and happy ending. Now, this is November. Personally, I'm not that fond of this month, but October was nice, and before we get to the book that I want to recommend to you, I want to talk about October. So I don't know about your October, but mine was fairly well. So I got to read and finish 4 books in total. It's not that much for me, but I was in kind of a reading slump. Nevertheless, I enjoyed the books that I read. In October, I also followed some releases and watched quite a lot of booktube videos. So I found a new to me booktuber who's quite good. His name is Greene, so check him out. It will be in the show notes of this episode at Campus Radio Karlsruhe at our website. So if you want to check back on the books that I recommend and or mention and the other recommendations that I give to you, just check out the show notes. So Greene, he's also mainly reading fantasy books, and he just had an interview with Brandon Sanderson and also with Stephen Erikson, who wrote the Melisande Empire books. They are quite chunky, they are very, very big. I read some of the books of the series. It's 10 books in total. Every book is a tome of 800 pages or more. It's quite a good series. You find it in the American Library in Karlsruhe, so if you want to read some epic fantasy, you can go to the American Library Karlsruhe. I also got to enjoy one video about vampires by Hardback Hoarder. Hardback Hoarder is a booktuber, and she did a very, very good and in-depth video on vampires in literature and how they developed over the times. In October, my favorite author, Gail Carriger, brought out another book. Usually she writes fiction, but this one was non-fiction. So I want to talk to you about her new book, which is called The Heron's Journey. I first bought the ebook of it, but because it's non-fiction and it's talking about narrative structures, I can use it very well for analyzing books that I read. So I found out the hard way that ebooks aren't really good to annotate. While you can underline or mark up certain passages, it's hard to find them afterwards, in my opinion. While when you have a print version, you can put tabs on it, you can easily or much more easily find the marked up pages. It's much easier to find the stuff that you want to talk about or which are important passages. Just now, things to notice, which is on page 91. Involuntary action. The heroine's descent, as a result, moves her away from civilization and safety and her seat of power toward solitary, unacceptable risk. The more isolated she becomes, the weaker she is. So just this, I would have had a hard time to find in the ebook, so this is why I just got the print version, and now I can flip through it and just reread passages which I found important. Actually, first time ever that I first bought the ebook and then just bought the print version. So it's already showing signs of wear and tear because I'm not that nice to books, because I cracked the spine and just put them openly on the pages. But nevertheless, I work with it, and so I'm fine that some pages have some signs of use. In any case, I find the print edition quite good, and it was printed by a certain big internet bookstore that we all know. And it was printed in Poland, in Wrocław to be exact. I was quite surprised when I ordered it by this in Germany that they had it on stock. Now it makes sense that they printed it in Europe and then have it available for us to read and enjoy. In any case, the book in itself is quite well done. It is a good binding, so breaking the spine is fine. The only issue that I have with it is that The paper is too bright in my opinion. It's very, very high white and I don't like this. I tend to prefer a little more off-white, but this is just a small issue that I have. If it doesn't in any way subtract from the quality of the book, it's just a general preference of mine. In any case, I highly recommend this book, even though I'm not completely finished, because it's non-fiction, it's very dense. However, Gail Carriger is, while she is an academic, she was an archaeologist, and her books are mainly in the genre of fantasy, and she has a very, very amusing writing style, and this you can also enjoy in the Heroine's journey. So there's quite a bit of snark in it, and she has fun with the topic. So I quite like it. Nevertheless, because she is an academic, she provides the sources and does citations. So if you want to read further, you get the necessary resources. And there are also links to certain issues and certain topics, like the library journal, where they talked about the circulation of certain genres, and they're part of the library system in the US. And she provides data, she provides you with the necessary background information, and in the citations you find even more information. Nevertheless, it's very enjoyable. It's not a dry academic text about the heroine's journey. You may have heard of the hero's journey. It's a narrative structure when you write fiction, genre fiction in general. Now, the hero's journey is very well known in the zeitgeist, made known by Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I haven't read this book so far. However, after reading Gail Carriger's treatise, I'm a bit scared of reading Campbell because I'm anxious that he has a dry writing style. The heroine's journey is also a narrative structure, however it isn't that well known, and this is why Gail Carriger wrote this book. It's for writers, readers and fans of pop culture, and she does use a lot of examples from the pop culture to make her points, to introduce you to the hero's journey and to the heroine's journey, and she compares those two, which is useful because that way you can see how those two diverge. And the heroine's journey, while it isn't that well known, is actually quite well used and well liked by the reading community. And this is due to the fact that the heroine's journey is a very, very positive narrative structure, and it provides mainly happy endings. So it's used mainly in 3 genres, which are comedy, romance and fantasy, which are also genres which are in the literary world not that well regarded. Personally, I like those genres. I read mainly fantasy, and what I've learned from this book is that my favorite stories, my favorite series, my favorite books, my favorite movies are all heroine's journeys. Now, surprisingly, the heroine's journey, while it is gendered feminine, she explains this really well in the book, by the way. While the heroine's journey is gendered feminine, the protagonist, the main character, which does go on this journey, doesn't have to be biologically female. He can also be a man. So one of the most known heroines who's male is Harry Potter. Most of us like Harry Potter and the whole series. Never mind the issues that we have with the author. The heroine's journey, to again quote Gail Carriger in one pithy sentence, so easy to find. Increasingly networked protagonist strides around with good friends, prodding them and others onto victory together. This is the heroine's journey. So this is why we all like it, because it's a happy ending, it's connection, it's stuff that we crave in our everyday lives and that we don't always get. Now, the hero's journey, again to quote her directly, Increasingly isolated, protagonist stomps around prodding evil with pointy bits, eventually fatally prods Betty, gains glory and honor. And as she says in this sentence, is that this hero is actually more and more isolated. The hero can also be a woman. Gail Carriger gives the example of Wonder Woman in the 2017 movie. Gail Carriger says that, and if you have seen it, you will probably also know that this story follows the narrative structure of the hero's journey. So in the end, Wonder Woman is alone, though alive, luckily for her, because this is another thing of the hero's journey. Either the hero is alone at the end or the hero is dead. And this is something I really don't like. As I've said before, in the evening, in my downtime, I want to read positive things. This is why I really, really like fantasy books. This is why I also like romance, if it's done well. Those are genres which are critically not that well loved and often criticized. The readers know the structure inherently. We read romance or the heroine's journey because we want this happy ending. So if we don't get it, but before everything is happening as in heroine's journey is supposed to be, then we feel betrayed and then we don't like it. So this is something that you can often see in reviews, that if a book doesn't get 5 points or 5 stars or something like this, or a high rating, but the reviews say the ending was absolute crap, you can almost always be sure that the author was going down one journey's path and then finished it wrong in the journey's canon, and therefore the reader feels betrayed, which is something that you shouldn't do as an author, because this means your readers won't come back if they feel betrayed by you. So this is definitely an issue. And what I also like about this book, and what Gail is also talking about on a recent podcast she did with Kobo, I will link it too in the show notes. She's talking about how the writing and publishing industry work. A lot of authors want to live from their trade. So as an author, you need to look into the wants and the needs of your audience. And if you betray them multiple times, they won't come back. You won't sell your stuff. So if you want an audience which likes you, which buys your books, then you need to provide them with what they want. So if you want to write romance, which is perfectly good and which also pays well if you do it well, then it's not good if you betray your audience. So you can toe the line between these journeys. You can do some fun stuff and put in archetypes that don't normally are in this genre or in this journey, but you still need to toe the line so that your readers don't feel betrayed. And she talks extensively about this and how to do this. So this is a really good manual also when you want to write and you sometimes don't know how to go further and something feels off with your story or something like this. So this is actually a good guide for writers who are starting out. For me as a reader, it means that now I can look much more into what I like, and I will have an easier time to find the books that I like and the shows that I like or the movies that I like. Personally, I have an absolute thing for Chinese dramas currently, or East Asian dramas. I absolutely enjoy them, mainly because they are very heavy on the heroine's journey. And there were some dramas where they did the heroine's journey, where they were fun, and then the ending wasn't according to the structure. And yes, I felt betrayed, and those dramas don't get that much views. So there you need to also work the narrative structure right, or you will lose your viewership. You will have quite some fun when you go through in your mind your favorite books and stuff like this, because I realized that really a lot of the movies that I watched, for instance Howl's Moving Castle, is a heroine's journey, or Station Agent, which is a movie from 2003. It's with Peter Dinklage, which you might know from Game of Thrones. You will learn a lot of things about the stories that you like, and you can then find it easier to find the stuff that you like. And I also think that Doctor Who is a heroine. Now, Gail Carriger says in this book he's a prophet, but I don't think so. At least in the last few installments, mainly with Matt Smith and David Tennant, he was the heroine, because he's looking for connection, because he's looking for a network of friends, and because he's empowering his friends. And so I think Doctor Who is a heroine too. So I quite like this book, and it will help me to also in the future better analyze the books that I read. So it's also a good book for podcasters, and I think for literary agents, or even for students who are reading and studying literature. I think for them it's also quite helpful, because you tend to write stuff in school, and I think this would have been quite helpful to me in school to take apart certain literature and know more about it. So I highly recommend this book. It's currently not available at the Cultural Library System. However, I think they will eventually get it. As I've said before, if you are even remotely interested in stories and story structure, then this book is definitely worth the read. I highly recommend it. It's fun to read. You learn a lot of interesting facts about the publishing industry, or you learn a lot about how to write, and you learn a lot of how to analyze it. So you learn about archetypes, you learn about how things are put together by authors, because the heroine's journey and the hero's journey, if they aren't done well, they might have messages which are really, really bad for certain people. So the authors, they need to think about what messages they are sending, because as communicators know, you can't not communicate. And it's good to know. If you read certain books, you will know the structure really well. So I'm currently still reading The Cemetery Boys, and I highly recommend it so far. I really enjoy it. However, in the middle, I had an inkling who the bad guy is behind it in this, and I was right. And the thing is that Gail Carriger, in the heroine's journey, as she explains the beats of the hero's journey and the heroine's journey, she also talks about who the villains are often. And I just had to think about The Cemetery Boys, because it's happened there, and it was fun to read this and to be right about it. And the more you read, the more you get to know certain narrative structures, and so it's good to actually read about them and even better understand the books that you read or the other stories that you consume. The Heron's Journey just published on 1st of October by Gail Carriger, and you can get it as an ebook, you can get it as a print version. I highly recommend the print version, and she's currently also working on the audiobook version, but it will take a few months until that is out. She's self-publishing it, so this is why it takes a bit more time. Otherwise it would be out all at the same time, but later than this way. So I'm quite glad that she did publish it this way. In November there are also some books coming out, and I will give you some hints. Charlie N. Holmberg, which is the author of The Paper Magician, which I liked, has brought out Spellbreaker. It was released on 1st of November. Then Jen Bennett brings out Chasing Lucky on November 11th. Jen Bennett writes mainly contemporary. I read one book of hers and I liked it. Then Brandon Sanderson is bringing out the 4th installment of the Stormlight Archives. I haven't read it so far. Weirdly enough, you can already vote for it in the Goodreads Choice Awards, even though most of us haven't read it so far, and it only comes out on the 17th of November, which is also the start of the final voting round. It doesn't make any sense to me. But there are also other fantasy books and romance books that haven't been out yet that are on this list. How they can be on this list is beyond me. But anyway, this is another whole controversy in the booktube and the reader community, by the way. The fact that Goodreads is putting on this list books that either aren't out yet when we can vote, or are just were published like 2 weeks ago. And as we all know, we need time to get to the books. I mean, The Invisible Life of Eddie Larue was published on 6th of October, and I just got my copy of it on the 2nd of November. So I haven't read it. How could I say that this is the best fantasy book for me this year? It's just not right. And they did this in the romance part too. And some stuff is also weirdly in the wrong genre. I wouldn't have put some stuff in the general fiction category, like The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I wouldn't have put it there. I would have put it in fantasy. But it's also marketed as normal fiction, which is weird to me. Anyway, last but not least, Black author Tochi Onyebuchi, Rebel Sisters War Girls 2, also will be released on November 11th. So personally, I'm looking forward to Brand Sanderson and Jen Bennett's Chasing Lucky, but I will not get to Rhythm of War Stormlight Archives until next year, or maybe the year after, because I haven't even started reading The Way of Kings. I got The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson last week in preparation of the lockdown, and luckily we don't have a full-on lockdown in Germany. We only have some industries closed for the month of November, so the libraries are still open, and from what I've seen, also bookstores, and I'm happy that the bookstores are open because I had ordered the hardback of The Invisible Life of Eddie Larue, and it was delivered on the first day of the shutdown. So if the lockdown had become like the one in March, I wouldn't have gotten the book this week. So I would have been really mad about it. So I'm glad that the shutdown isn't complete and they kept open quite a bit of stuff. So this is it for this episode. I hope you like it. I hope you're well. I hope you stay well and you and your loved ones don't get COVID. And I hope you have an enjoyable November and you find good stuff to read. This was Engineered Unicorns at Campus Radio Karlsruhe. My name is SandyJ. I'm your local book dragon, and the music, as always, is by Erwin Schmidt. See you soon.